Hello and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for September. That's all we're doing. I'm not doing the days of the week anymore because it's moving on. Because I think we're potentially near enough episode 200, which means I have not been stopped. I have not been thwarted, which means I can take my fight on to the rest of the podcasting world, which is always a good thing. But joining me tonight, I guess my podcast guest who is following me on this journey is the one, the only. You could say they're a little bit zany. You might even say they're a little bit quirky. It's Emma May from Emmerse Studios. Hello, Emma.
Hiya. Is that it?
You alright?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you.
I was expected to. Obviously, I need to consider that intro because that intro was quite rubbish. How you doing anyway? You well?
It wasn't rubbish. I'm
That's
very
good.
well. I've just come back from a show and I'm extremely exhausted. So you kind of catch me on. I'm just catching sort of that second wind now. So I know we were having a conversation earlier where we were saying, should we talk tonight? And I was like, yes, even though it's been crazy.
So what you're potentially saying is that any time in the next 45 minutes you could just zone out and go to sleep and that would be finished.
No, because I've been sleeping. I've been sleeping a lot since coming back from the show. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yesterday I was burnt out, but today I'm better.
Oh, that's good then. I suppose I better say hello to everybody out there. Thank you for listening. The reason that we do this, as I said, because I like doing it. There you go. That's a reason to do anything, isn't it? Because you like doing it. And we like speaking to people, and which is why we asked Emma on the show, because she is a mine of knowledge about board games, and I caught her not too long ago talking on the Unlucky Frog podcast, friends of the show. And I said, well, I definitely need to speak to Emma and have a chat. And so there you go. So we've established that you're cruising away on a crest of large and massive amounts of sleep. I guess I need to ask you, only because I was prompted slightly. Where's the name come from? Is it just named after yourself? You know, is it like...
Well, it's not, but everybody assumes that it is. It is and it's not.
You can't say it's like E-M-M-E
yeah,
and
it
then
is.
E-M-M-A, but...
Yeah, it is and it's not. Basically, when I was coming up with the name, I was working on a virtual reality project and I hadn't started a company before. And
all right.
The people who I was working with a university basically, and I was going for an Innovate UK grant. But in order to apply for the grant, I needed to have a company, and I had 48 hours to come up with a company. So we were going over all of these different names, and as the virtual reality industry is growing, everyone's calling themselves Emmerse or Emmerse. So I couldn't use Emmerse because there's so many companies called Emmerse, so we kind of then switched to the M and I still managed to become Emmerse Studios. So yeah, it is named after me, but it's not really. It wasn't intended to. That's
a very, very good made up story, but
not made up story.
I'm still tempted.
We had 48 hours. It was over a weekend, literally, and then we were going for it, and then it didn't end up happening in the end.
It's fine. It's all good. Did you go into the virtual reality stuff then, or did you?
Well, this is what happened. So I started my company in November 2016. I've still got the game going. It's going to happen in the next couple of years at least.
All right.
But what happened was so many people were asking me to design a card game that I ended up with 4 projects coming up into the new year, and I couldn't work on all of them. And I realised that going into a virtual reality game at this point, having not run a company before, was a huge risk. So I decided to go on something that was a lesser risk and trial what a business is.
I'm colouring myself confused as to why you've said you had 4 people asking you to make a card game, because obviously I like the sound of my own voice, so I talk a lot. I don't think I've had anybody ask me to even make them a cup of tea. So I'm wondering, I mean, what's your kind? I mean, how did you get into that
asking.
Situation? Yeah, why?
So I had a card game in 2013, which came from a book. So, excuse me for the not as creative titles, but I wrote a book called 365 Days to Getting Into Character,
All right.
which was prompted by my best friend who had brought a Tony Robbins audio book or audio session, which she thought was 365 Days of Personal Power. It was a 2-hour seminar. So I said, I'll make you a book and I'll write some positive things every single day that you can do and get yourself into your personal power. And it turned into a really silly book where I'd tell you to be a pirate or talk to people by oinking at them and all sorts of things. And from there, we kind of went, we can make this into a drinking game. So I then invented Cards with Character, which at that point wasn't a really well-formulated game. I did a bit of testing with it and some artwork tests. I took it to Kickstarter and I funded it for, I think, £730.
Wow.
And then after that, I was like, well, it's not really a core concept for a game, so I didn't bother taking it any further, and I ended up working in tech. So when I ended up leaving that job and going into my own business, I was showing people my card game, and that's when they went, can you make it into a 2-player game? If you brought this out at Christmas, it'd be fantastic. And it's kind of just that growth story of once I got into product development, I understood more about what I did wrong on those projects, and I could recreate them now.
Did you come from a kind of a tabletop-y type background then? Were you, or have you always just been the type of person that just goes out and makes stuff and kind of creates stuff and just does stuff kind of thing?
I wouldn't say I'm part of a tabletop anything. I kind of came into it in the last 2 years. I think even in the first year of Emmerse Studios, I was like, I'm not part of this world and I don't understand it. And all these people know each other. And now I've been in it 2 years. Loads of people know who I am, which is really crazy. But saying I'm not really in that world, I mean, I did grow up with board games. And my favourite game is chess. And I used to play chess every week with my dad. And I've even got my own...
Nobody talks about chess. You know that.
I know, you don't really kind of think about it as a tabletop game, but it's like one of the most sort of ancient games out there, which games have derived from. And I just love the strategy in it.
Yeah, and it is kind of like, you forget about how many things chess has kind of spurned. You know, just your strategies, having things with different moves, having things with different powers. Do you know what I mean? Having things to sacrifice. You know, having just all these kind of strategies that you can have. I mean, you could say that Magic the Gathering's like that, based on what you've got in front of you. You have to do certain movements, certain ways, kind of thing. And it's really interesting that you say that, because people usually chime in with Monopoly.
Oh yeah, we used to play Monopoly quite a bit.
Yeah, and yet you've got chess kind of sitting on the shelf next to it, going, "What about me?"
But did you ever play, here's another one that no one really talks about, but loads of people had when they were younger, Pogs.
I did not. I must admit.
You didn't have Pogs?
I did not.
So,
no.
You used to collect them, and it's kind of like a flicky game. But I remember, because you could collect all the Pogs, but also, I think I've still got them somewhere in the attic. My sister actually had the board game for it, and I can't even remember how you played the board game.
I can't even imagine that. Has it got like little slots in the side so you could stick them all together as well? Or am I thinking of something completely different? That is something completely different. Yeah. I've just been daft. No, I must be far too old. I still had like a stick and a hoop in the street.
I'm going to have to post... I'll have to post some pictures of Pogs and see how many people retweet it. Yeah, I'm going to have to, because we've got a community on Twitter.
You could actually do that. You could actually say to people, this is Fantasy Flight's new you could say it's Fantasy Flight's new immersive completely brand new game that's unique to every person, and just see how many folk. That's the type of thing I would do, just to see how many folk would bite, and then you get one smart person going, "That's Pogs." I think you'll find.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. My company policies is that we're very honest. We're honest and trustworthy. They're part of our core values.
See, mine is you've got a set amount of time doing this, so you might as well get everything you can. So it's not very nice. It's not very honest, but you know, it helps make me smile. So your background then, is your background more, you know, kind of business and stuff like that? Then you said you mentioned tech. So did you come from have you come from a technical background?
Kind of. I actually studied for 3D modelling and animation.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to do anything, I'd love to go into digital game design, because I can character model. I can animate a tiny bit. I'm more of a make the artwork type of person. But I ended up falling into the tech industry when I was freelancing, and I couldn't afford anything anymore and had to get a job. This is the bad time I had with the book and the card game, and it didn't go anywhere, and ended up in a job. I ended up as a production technician, and I was literally screwing in the same screws on a computer every single day for about 8 months. And I was like, I'm more talented than this. I can do something else. Really? So I ended up. I'm quite natural at networking and sort of the entrepreneurial skills. Well, in a company, it's called intrapreneurship. So you're connecting ideas and networking with inside the industry so that you can go further. And I ended up getting a crazy pay rise and a job created for me, and I was mentored by the MD of the company. So whilst I was in that role, they were throwing different creative projects at me and saying, we want to do this or we want to do that. So I'd innovate in that space, and I'd work anywhere from the producing the brief or having the brief come to me, and then designing the project in CAD, to talking to the customers and working with the purchasing department and the sales team. So what I did there was learn that entire journey from how do you create something and how do you get somebody interested in it. Yeah. And then when I left the company, that's what I really wanted to do, is work in products. So whilst I am in tabletop, I am in games basically. So I want to create more games, but I also quite like the idea of making toys and electronics.
But how do you get round to that? I mean, were you doing something and then it's like, was it like Big in Tom Hanks? Did you go out into a store and play like a big huge piano and play with the boss, and then they went, oh, you could do this for us? Or was it just, did you just like rock up and say, look, these screws into boards and stuff, that's not my bag. Can I show you what I can do? I mean, was it just like a natural?
Kind of, but no. You know when you like, I'm not in my talent right now and I don't know what to do. Every time someone important walked past, I'd scream in my head, notice me, somebody notice me, I've got more talents than this. But nobody heard my thoughts, so I was I'm going to have to actually do something.
So, you start chucking things at folk as they went past. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't get that far.
No.
That works, it took a long time. It took a long time to get in front of the right people. So I'd always show people my work, or I'd go away and I'd build my website and then show people the website I was building, or show people like different parts of my portfolio. Always the wrong people, but those people would talk to other people who I'd then eventually get to talk to. So it's about asking the right questions to sometimes the wrong people and then the right people. And even then I was asking my manager, how do I get a job in engineering? And he said, I can't do anything for you, but you'd have to talk to the engineering manager. And it was just really, it's a coincidence that at that point he said that the engineering manager walked past the room I was in. So I was like, I'll ask him now. And then from there, they kind of took me under their wing and mentored me for about 6 weeks. And then he said, if you're really serious about doing this, then I'll get you a meeting with the boss. And
you just no fear then? Is that your type of personality? Are you just like saying, well, I might as well go and do this because if I don't do this, then nothing's going to happen kind of thing?
Well, I kind of think in that in the job role I had, I was quite depressed because I wasn't doing anything with my skills.
Yeah.
But I was actually the most scared of that because I had this promise of this interview with someone that ran this company. And in the space of time that I was leading up to that, my head was going, if you want to, you can give up and you can do this job forever, Emma. And I went, I don't really want to do this forever, so I'm going to have to take the leap and just try something new.
Okay. Is that not scary? I mean, is that not... I mean,
it was very scary, yes.
I know of a lot of people who would sit there and say, well, I could do this an awful lot better. And it's like, well, why don't you go and do it an awful lot better? And it's like, well, look, I'm living in a house and I've got a car and I've got mortgage payments and there's food that needs to go on the table and stuff like that. So was it... I mean, hats off to you for doing that, because it's not... I could probably do it, but it'd be a scary time to kind of do it. But just like... Yeah.
I was going to say, the job that I was in at that point wasn't... It was a minimum wage job. So I was on 12 grand a year. And if I lost that job, I'm sure I could have found another one. But I don't think trying to improve yourself would lose you the job. It would just mean if it wasn't the right job for me, I'd just go back to that job in their company. Mm-hmm.
So where'd you go from there then? I mean, how do you end up kind of... You obviously you mentioned that you'd were kind of creating your own company and then went down the lines of creating your own kind of card game. But then where did you go from there?
Well, I left that company about a year after having the new job and the pay rise. And that's that's the scariest risk I think I took. Actually, I took 2 scary risks, and it was a year after that. So I left that company to start my own business, and I was kind of a little bit destroyed from that journey because there's so much to learn. And at the time I was 25, and I think I went through about 3 mental breakdowns because of how much I was learning. And I kind of just fell apart at the end. And then I didn't think I was good at product, and I left that company. And I feel a bit off about this, but I started a life coaching business. And I started a life coaching business because basically the role I was in was supposed to prepare me to take on students to teach them how to do product development. But when I left, I wasn't qualified enough to go into business consultation.
Right.
Because I didn't have the experience behind me to say to someone, this is how you do something successfully. All I had done is getting a pay rise in a hostile environment. And people were surprised how I did that. But then there's no evidence of that to anyone else. So why would they trust me to help them become successful? So I took life coaching on and I did a course. And it's not completely bizarre because I've been doing personal development for about 11 years. And I used to be very, very shy. I used to never be able to speak to anybody. And now I'm in a place where universities are calling me up and asking me to do 20-minute talks about customer acquisition, all that sort of stuff, in front of hundreds of people. And it's a world away from where I used to be when I was 18. And I was still codependent on other people so that I could do anything. But I had to break all of that. So I went into life coaching. And I don't think that it wasn't a waste of time. It helped me a lot to find out who I was and how to build a business that I wanted. And also I helped a lot of people along the way. And I learned a lot about the marketing side of things. So my personal Twitter I took from, I think I had 200 followers at the time, and I took it to 4,000 followers in about 4 months.
Wow.
So if you see that account and it's got a lot of followers on, that's because that's what I did then. But I'm not focused on it now, so I'm not growing it. And I'm also not growing Emmerse Studios because I don't have time to do that because I'm focused too much on building my brand in actually putting the card game out there and doing appearances that way. There's a lot there to digest. I understand.
I mean, let's start with the life coaching then. I mean, I've seen people approach life coaching in certain ways, and some of them it's just, in some ways it's kind of positively giving positive affirmations to somebody who already kind of knows where they kind of want to go, but just maybe need that extra helping hand. And then I heard other people saying, like, there's just folk coming in and saying, listen, I am kind of broken and I just need to take things steps at a time, and I need somebody to kind of help me show me the way how I can get kind of where I want to be. I mean, do you end up kind of becoming, when you're doing the life coaching, is every person that you're dealing with, do you have to kind of do something completely different, or did you have kind of like set things that you followed?
Well, for me, I think what I'm very good at in business is understanding people's aims or goals, and being able to connect those with other people who can provide them with a way forward. That I think that's just a talent of mine. But when I talk to people who are coming to me because they feel stuck and they don't know which way to move, it was about understanding and listening to the stories and the patterns in between. Because another thing that I'm very good at is finding a pattern, and then knowing that pattern is where they're feeling stuck, and then flipping it on its head, and then I don't want to say attacking it from that angle. And what ends up happening is we can have a 45-minute conversation, and we will find the root cause of why they have a particular behaviour in an area that they're feeling stuck in. And it enables them to then have that clarity of that thing. And what happens when we have that conversation is usually that person is like, I want to get off the call now, and I'm ready to take action. And I'm like, oh my God, okay. Okay, we're finished here then. You go off and do that thing. And then, but the thing I don't like is that because I'm the one there helping them to see the clarity, is that they then become codependent on me. Yeah. Because they get to a point where they become stuck again with something else, and then they constantly need the support. And I'm kind of the person that I want to give you as much as I possibly can, but I want you to then find your own sort of path within it. Is that kind of like the student outgrows the teacher in a way?
Yeah, it's people becoming self-sufficient and being able to spot their own, I guess, their own issues and knowing how to tackle it themselves, or knowing how to forge their own path without having sometimes it's kind of them having their own confidence and knowing that they're sometimes making the right decision. I mean, I've said this before, and something as stupid as people backing kind of Kickstarters to people making decisions about, but designing board games, for instance, sometimes people just need somebody to say, you can do that, or you should be getting on and doing that, because there's a little bit of a lack of justification to themselves that they've got the abilities to do it, or they can just go ahead and do it themselves, kind of thing, which is always interesting. I'm in sales, Emma. Yeah. I mean, that's my job. I'm in sales and consultancy. I'm always looking. Sometimes you'll have people kind of asking you, saying, I'm about to spend this amount of money on using you as a consultant to help me do X, Y, Z. Is that the right move, do you think? They're actually asking the person who's asking for the service or the money in the first place whether or not they think it's a good idea, just because it's sometimes difficult to take responsibility for your own actions, and you're always looking for somebody else just to give you kind of like confirmation that you're kind of correct, which is always kind of interesting. It seems like then with what you're doing kind of now, because I know that you're still kind of very, very busy just now, kind of just helping people connect with other people, and as you say, kind of it's almost like facilitating, enabling people to do things that, to achieve things. Where does Quirk come into all of this? How does that fit
I'm confused. But so that's a kind of different. There's two different sides of me. You're saying,
yes.
Well, this is the funny thing. So the life coaching for me, at the time, it was something I needed to do to help me through a tough period in my life. When I started that business, I can be totally honest. When I started the business, I kind of knew it was wrong for me, because I ended up having bruises all over my body, and I was completely stressed. But I was following it anyway, because I thought where I feel my calling is in product, and I thought my calling wasn't for me until 8 months in, and I realised I had to change. And then I started Emmerse Studios, and I've had tons of success just being in this business alone. So it kind of makes sense that I'm here. But the life coaching side doesn't go away. There's so many lessons that I'm still teaching people, and I don't know if you've seen any of my blogs on Emmerse Studios, but I'm trying not to do the life coaching thing, but at the same time there's so many people who now come to me and ask me the same questions. I've had probably in a week 7 game designers who are asking the same questions over and over again, and they're worried about the same things, they're going through the same sort of emotional cycles. And I understand that as well, because I'm going through it, and I just feel like because I've done it and I've done quite a lot of things successfully, I can talk about them in a way that can take away some of those pain points of them going through it.
Do you think there's a need for that then? Do you think there's a definite need? Because
yes. The simple answer is yes. I don't think it's just the tabletop industry. The tabletop industry is growing massively, and there's so many people going, I can design a game. And there's a lot of naivety that comes with that. And I'm saying that as I've been through that naivety. I've designed Quirk, and I've put a Kickstarter campaign together, and I failed funding it because I thought if I just put a Kickstarter campaign together, it's going to be an excellent game and everyone's going to come and back it. And that's obviously the wrong way to do it. You need to be able to build that audience up over a long period of time, and you have to interest people constantly, and you need to show up constantly. But that does take its toll on you. And I've talked about it with a lot of designers, because there's so many people that are actually struggling with just designing or developing their game, or there's so many things that go wrong in that process as well. And you've got an audience once you have Kickstarter, and you have to be able to supply that game to them whilst things are going wrong and people are getting angry at you. So there's a lot to take on, and it's not just that. It's when you design a game that's putting it out there and will people like it, because that tears you apart, because you're putting your heart and soul into something and then someone rates it down and you think all I've ever done is listen to my audience and it's the right thing for them.
Yeah I think what there is nowadays is there's more and more backup for the practical sides of things, and I think there's just as much stress on somebody that is going through a tough time getting their product funded than somebody who's all of a sudden finding themselves at the other end of the spectrum. I mean, I remember having Peter Blanken on the show a couple of times, and Subterra did really, really well on Kickstarter, still doing really, really well on Kickstarter. And then things just, it seemed like one thing after another just didn't seem to be going as well as it could be. And he was under a lot of pressure to deliver, and then all of a sudden he had several thousand strangers kind of almost knocking on his door asking, what's going on with this? I'm expecting this, when is this getting delivered? I was expecting this to have this is broken, this isn't working, I need this replaced, kind of thing. I think you consider kind of the design, you consider the logistics. I don't see many people kind of saying, I've thought about the emotional, the potential emotional stress that's going to be involved in running this, and these are the steps that I've taken in order to kind of almost protect myself from the stresses and strains that kind of been going on. Is that what you've been? Is that why people have been kind of contacting you?
Yeah, that's the side of it. Actually, people contact me about the steps on what do you do to get where you're going. But at the same time, I like to put that emotional spin on it, because I know the struggle it is. The mental struggle is that it takes for you to do something successful, because whilst you can have a campaign that fails and that really hurts, the worst thing is having a successful campaign where you create more problems. So every time I get a next level of success, I've got 10 more problems to solve, and I've got more responsibility than the last project. So I always say, if you do a Kickstarter campaign and it fails, it's a really good learning structure for you, because at least then you don't have the responsibility to fulfill on something that you haven't done before, and you can then get your sort of head together and think, how can I do this more successfully, and then prepare myself for what comes afterwards.
So
and also smaller campaigns are better for that as well. You don't want to have a massive success on your first game. Sorry.
No, I think I think it's really weird because I've spoken to a lot of people who have had kind of massive successes on the first games. Like your Frank, as I say, well, Peter himself,
Yeah.
that wasn't his first game, but it was certainly kind of a huge one that came after. Frank West, Kevin Young, of Inspiring Games. I've spoken to, there's a few guys across the pond, Mark Neiglinger, Richard Keane. I mean, all these guys have ended up kind of propping up kind of 6-figure Kickstarters, and they've gone from saying, oh, I'm a one-man band, or there's me and my brother, or there's me and a couple of friends, to all of a sudden I've got to think about offices, and or I've got to think about putting my best smart jacket on because I've got to be meeting some important people and things like that. I've got to be flying here or going and doing this or going and doing that. And all of a sudden, something I just wanted to be able to take out a box and have fun, all of a sudden became very, very kind of grown up indeed, which is which you can't prepare yourself for. I mean, kind of...
You never know what's honestly on the other side. So, I mean, as much as I can give the advice on it's better to do a small campaign, I think it is better to do a small campaign because then at least you learn some of that journey without taking on massive risk. I'm always about small risk. I've been growing my business over the last 2 years, 10 months of development, and then the last couple, since October. So Quirk's only been on the market for 11 months now, and I went from having, like, you look at Quirk on Kickstarter, and a lot of people will assume that it's not going to be a massive project because I think the first project I got 77 backers, the second project I had 142 backers, so I never do anything massive, but within 11 months I've sold almost 3,000 games on my own, and I've done that on Amazon, in the market, and I've taken on 10 retailers, but then I do things in a very precise way.
I mean, are you quite meticulous in your planning then? Do you find yourself kind of...
I wouldn't say so. One thing that I'll tell you a little bit about, but I won't go into detail of, is I've had probably a very troublesome journey with Quirk because, I put the first Kickstarter campaign up and it failed. And then 5 months later, I did 5 months worth of testing with my audience on the game mechanics, adding cards to it, whether the artwork was all right, cutting cards out, looking at the price point, and then buying a small prototype run to test that price point. Just around the time I was getting my first Kickstarter campaign funded, and I got funded for about 1,500 with Quirk, I ran into a trademark issue with a big games company.
Really?
And that was one of 2 trademarks. And it took me, I wanted just to have fun in my business. So I had to, in that space of time, still develop the game. I had to look into CE marks and getting it tested so that obviously it was safe for toy safety in the EU. And then also battling trademark issues and wondering why all of my money was going on lawyers and not on my development costs. And wondering whether my business would survive. And I ended up for 9 months going through that, and I won both. And both of these companies, they're both probably multi-million pound companies, and I'm here starting up. And at the point that I went for it and I took on my lawyers, I had to believe that Quirk would do what it's done in the market in the last 11 months that it has done before it had done it. Which is an incredible amount of faith.
Were they expecting you just to kind of like put your hands up and say, right, you win? I take it that was
probably,
that what they were kind of expecting?
Probably because I was so small at the time. I think one of them actually saw me at the UK Games Expo and gave me a business card. And that's the problem. You kind of never know who you're speaking to, especially when you're really small.
Yeah. And it's a strange thing because it's like I've seen, what was this? I saw something ridiculous the other day about some guy who was selling chicken out of his restaurant was getting sued by Nando's of all people because his business name was Fernando's. And
oh, right.
Nando's were suing him and they're saying, well, why And it was just a letter to say, like, look, we're gonna potentially sue you for trademark and, you know, potential copyright and everything, all the infringements, you know, big long letter, lots of complicated words, planning to scare. This guy's got one shop. You know, he's not a multinational or anything like that.
I think that's what they try and do. If they see that you're quite small, they try and stomp on you before you become anything big.
Yeah. But I mean, that must have been...
I'm just going to say, just imagine the emotional turmoil I was going through and still trying to put a game into the market. I mean, I think I've been through that. That feels like the worst for me. And it wasn't until February this year that I actually, because that's when the trademark's finished and I won, that I actually felt I could have fun in my business.
I take it, was it draining? I mean, of course it must have been draining.
It was.
I mean, was it?
It was horrible when I had the emails in my obviously in my email from their lawyers, and they were trying to change some of the terms and conditions on what we were putting in place, and I can't go into too much detail about it. It was just horrible just to see some of the stuff that they're trying to bully you on, and trying to make you out to be the weaker one, and you still have to be there. And again, it's the taking responsibility. So every kind of level of success, obviously, you get more responsibility. And I had to stand up and go, I need to fight for what I believe in, and I think Quirk's going to be big, so I'm going to keep going.
And you must have felt so relieved. And
in February I was. Otherwise, I wanted to cry. I didn't cry. I had to be stronger than that. There's a lot of pacing that happened.
Yeah.
And a lot of phone calls.
Because it's the last thing you expect when you put a Kickstarter together, isn't it? I mean, your primary worry is, are people going to like it? Are people going to be willing to back it? No, I'm going to have to put up with these emails from these huge behemoth companies who are just kind of like bullying me for you can't see for kind of any kind of reason kind of thing. Did that, I mean, in that, some ways, has that strengthened your resolve to kind of make sure that Quirk gets into as many places as possible?
Well, I always wanted to do that anyway. I've had a massive goal to get it out there. And I think even, I write so much content, but I on one of my Kickstarter updates, I think it might have been on Quirk Legends, I literally wrote on it, guys, I'm going to make this big for you, because I've got this massive reason why I want to make this huge. And it's mainly the people that are behind it, because what's really weird is that, and I've probably said this in another interview, is Quirk's not the game I wanted to create and put out there as my first project. And when we made the game, and I say we, because we had to take my old card game and turn it into a 2-player game, my sister, and I've written this has been in an interview, my sister took the whole card game and she basically told me what would work and what wouldn't work, and then said turn it into Go Fish. So it was kind of like the quickest, simplest method of coming up with a card game. Yeah. And I went, I don't want it to be Go Fish. I want it to be its own thing. But again, there's no original concept anymore. So with the cards that I had in the game, it was Go Fish, but we added the elements of being able to steal and defend and have the skip cards, which is that kind of next level up to Go Fish. And also, you have to make sounds and actions, which I haven't seen any other game do that with that concept. So it feels like a completely unique game, or an innovative version of Go Fish on the market. And then from there, it expanded. We've got Mischief cards, and I'm developing a new Kickstarter campaign, which I know this is why you got in contact with me in the first place, was about Quirk Hallows, because I'm supposed to be, I will be developing Quirk Hallows for October, an October campaign, and I'm actually worried now because I'm so busy that I'm everywhere and I still have to sit down, and I think I've drawn most of the characters out in my sketchbook, but I've digitized about 4.5 of them, and there's still a whole load more to do. And I mean, in the next couple of weeks I'm going to be going to EGX
All right.
Going tabletop gaming live. I'm going to be exhibiting, and then 3 weeks after that, I'm going to Essen to go to Spiel and exhibit.
Wow.
And I need, in between times, I'm also away, so I'm away for quite a lot of the time. I'm going to be in Paris and London in between that as well. And I need to be able to sit down and put this card game together, this new one. But it's going to have new cards in it. It's going to have it's going to be the same Quirk game, but it's going to have I'm going to call them trick or treat cards. So that's the expansion pack that will come with Kickstarter, because I always do something special for Kickstarter campaigns. And also everybody wants a t-shirt, which I didn't expect would be so popular.
You see if you're going to have a room full of t-shirts at some point in the future then.
Yeah, so when I did Quirk Legends, I had a t-shirt backer spot. And nobody, like only about 5 people probably chose a t-shirt. And as soon as I had them printed, after the campaign, so many people said, "How can I get a t-shirt now?" And I was like, "You can't. That's the whole point." But now,
that's the whole point of selecting your reward.
Yeah,
you select your reward at the time.
I went back and I actually did a pre-order for them because they were so popular. And then this year, this campaign that I'm thinking of doing for Quirk Hallows, I wasn't intending on doing any t-shirts because I just don't have enough time to do loads of things. I kind of want it to be quite a small campaign again. And so many people have said, if you release this game, I want to back for a t-shirt. So I feel like obliged now that there's going to be some t-shirts available for this campaign. You see what I mean about the pressure and the responsibility?
It's just, I don't know if hats as well, baseball caps, that'd be a good idea. You should maybe consider. You might as well in for a penny and for a pound.
You say this, but
really
what I kind of look at is I know how much it costs for me to send the game in certain types of packaging. So it kind of, I'm always about the most efficient way of being able to deliver this. So I got a lot of praise for Quirk Legends because I delivered that project within 6 weeks of the project being funded. I think it was about 6 weeks of that.
I'm sorry, you said 6. Sorry, 6 weeks within. Sorry, the line went a bit funny. You said 6 weeks within funding.
Yes.
No.
So we got funded. And then within 6 weeks of us being funded, the games were in people's doors.
That's just amazing. I know folk that are like sending out updates saying we're going to be 6 weeks late on our 3-month kind of time window. I mean, that's meticulous. That is kind of like meticulous type planning. But again,
well, it wasn't even planning. I didn't even have a print supplier when that Kickstarter funded, and I was still looking around for who I was going to go and print with next because I knew my print run would have been bigger. Yeah. And I ended up finding a company in the UK, and because I do print in the UK, and again, like I've already talked about my company values, one of the things I value in my company is giving back to the UK economy. And I print Quirk in the UK. What that means is it's got a clean supply chain. There's a big thing about modern slavery, and when you go to places like China, you don't know what the supply chain is like. And what they're working for. So it's really, what's hard about that is going into large retail, because if you read any of those policies, they have a Modern Slavery Act, and your supply chain has to be like a squeaky clean so that they can buy your product in. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to the retail chain that you're selling into.
I mean, I don't even know if people realize, people think about that. I think there's this thing to kind of keep the cost down as low as possible. And a lot of guys, I mean, they ain't taking no trips out to China to go and inspect kind of like the factories and stuff like that,
Because I also know that when you're doing something like a card game, I mean, it's different if you've got components in your games, because it kind of costs a bit more to go to the UK. So you have to go to a games manufacturer. But with a print run of just cards, China is expensive.
Yes.
But it's expensive in the terms of, it's like I went to China to look at my card game, and it was very, very cheap. But by the time they put the delivery costs on, I might as well have went to the UK. And I said to someone recently, I was like, there's no point me going to China, because it's like me going, do I want my cards in a 2-week turnaround or do I want them in 60 days? So I went with the UK.
Do you think that's maybe just is that an education thing then? Because I know that there's a lot of people out there that will just, automatically, I'm going to get quotes from China in order to get anything made. Whereas the kind of the UK market is is it maybe a missed opportunity? I mean, are there printers out there that aren't aware that the kind of the board game space is something to kind of be investigated, quite simply because they've not been asked to print stuff like that before? I mean, if I go into printers, I can't imagine sitting down with them and saying, well, listen, I need this, 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 and this, because there's a chance they haven't done it before, so they might not have the capability. But is maybe maybe that's my own ignorance, but maybe that's a market that's kind of untapped. And I guess you automatically think China's going to be reams cheaper anyway, I guess.
This is the kind of experience I've got. When I worked in the tech industry, one of my jobs was to source all the components for the product I was making. So right. I would have to go to several different companies, and I have to create a spreadsheet of all these components and then say, okay, well, we're going to do a bulk order. Where is the cheapest order for this? And one of the things I was looking into at the time was projection molding. And we could have went to the UK. I mean, looking at projection molding, anything you do in volume is going to cost you about £30,000 because there's a setup fee, and then you've got to pay for you've got to pay for the molds, and you've got to pay for the product to be made, and get the volume. And then I'd have to take the consideration of the setup and also the consideration of where I was getting it printed and the lead times, and then the cost per unit. And it was like the UK's cost per unit was more expensive, but in the short term, it was more cost effective. Whereas in China, it was so much cheaper, but if anything went wrong, then you'd have to go and spend another £30,000 to get it redone. So with the UK and rapid prototyping, it just made sense for a first project to go there than to go all the way to China. And then I sort of took that idea and went, okay, well, I'm going to look at a load of different places. It doesn't cost you to get quotes from anywhere, but if you know what you're looking for, so you know you're going to get 1,000 games printed, and you know the quality of the cards, and you're looking at the lead time, and then the cost of delivery, you can add all of that up and say, well, okay, how much is my cost per game at the end of all of that? And then you can really understand where you're going to make your money. It might be, for me, still expensive to print in the UK, but I still think that I'm saving the money from having it shipped over from China.
No, which is fair enough. And I guess the thing to say is, if you are a printer out there and you want to come on the show and have a chat, by all means. I mean, we have had somebody from Panda on the show.
Oh, excellent.
And and it'd be interesting to hear somebody. I can say, well, you could go to Panda. There's Watts Games as well. I would struggle to potentially name a UK printer off the top of my head.
So there was a story that came out. I can't remember. I don't know how long ago it was, but Top Trumps brought all of their production to the UK. And what that says to me is if a massive company like that is taking everything back to the UK, then it's not cost effective to be anywhere else in Europe or in Asia. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting, I guess.
It's taking the lead of the big guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they'll do. If you look at what the big business is doing, then that's, shortly the small business ends up following pretty quickly, because that's, people go where I guess where kind of the money is.
So I can give you I can give a shout out to Heartgraph, who are my printers. A lot people come to me and say, "Oh, I've seen your game on Heartgraph's website," so it's not a secret that I use them. But they are actually very good for printing card games because they have invested in 2 massive LIFO machines. And I went there and I saw 3,000 cards be printed in front of my eyes within an hour. And then they've got the equipment to cut the cards, they've got the equipment to make the boxes up, and they can do that all for you and then they can even send it out if you have an agreement with them. So it just depends on the kind of model that you have. But they are looking at the games industry, they understand the trends that are happening, and they are preparing themselves for an influx of game inquiries.
I think we'll get them on.
I can introduce you.
I would love that if you did that. I think let's get somebody from the UK kind of on just to represent the UK printing people. That would be a very, very cool thing. Very, very cool thing to do. I'm conscious of time, but anyway, I have questions in relation to Amazon, because you are one of these people that is selling on Amazon, and you've got your game there, and we kind of had a chat about that. But have you found kind of even having the presence on Amazon, has that been useful? Has that helped to provide the kind of a little bit of a kind of a tail in terms of online retail for you, or is it just a big pain and you're only there because you have to be there kind of thing?
Oh, there's so many questions around Amazon. I kind of want to go left field and then come in with something else. But
do that.
Okay, so I want to talk about niching, and hopefully I can bring this back so it makes any sense, but I might go on a tangent and we'll never go back there. But
that's fine.
We've just fallen into black holes and talking about design and development.
That's okay.
So I gave a talk to some students at Bournemouth University, and I used a very amazing anecdote for how you niche a product, or even how you network and how you get into industry or get noticed by anyone. I used pandemic as a as an example. Yes. So most people listening to your podcast will know how to play pandemic or how pandemic works. So I just don't think I need to explain it, but the way you should niche is how pandemic works with viruses. So you need to infect your brilliance. This is my term. You infect your brilliance in one area until it outbreaks into all the other areas. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And that's niching. So Amazon has been very good for me to get me the sort of clout behind me to say we're a 2-time bestseller on Amazon. But in order for me to become a 2-time bestseller on Amazon, I was going up against games like Uno, Travel Guess Who. There's some other games on there that are... There's some big games, and what I did was I tallied every single game on the top 20s page, and I got to slot 11, I think, within 6 weeks of going on to Amazon. What I tallied was whether that game had been on there for a long period of time, whether it was backed by Amazon, or whether it had a name for itself, like Guess Who, where people will buy it anyway because they know the name. And my game was the only independent game on the first page of the bestsellers list for travel games. And that's because of that little anecdote or example I've given you for pandemic, is infecting your brilliance in a niche area so that it outbreaks. So the idea with that, and I'm giving away my strategy here, is that That's
fine. I'll cut this entire bit out if you want. I will not cut this bit out. This is gold. Keep going.
Yes. So I niched in travel games because everybody, when people go onto Amazon, they go, okay, I've got a card game. I'm honest to it. I've got a card game. In card games, there's something like 250,000 games, and that's what you're competing against. And you're not going to get seen if you're an independent game designer. So I went into travel games because there was only just over 1,000 games in that category. And then because it works between ads and organic buy-in, I had a bunch of friends go and buy it. So your rank changes every hour based on the amount of sales you're getting. So the sales per day as well. And because I was getting quite a few organic sales, I was getting pushed further and further up the page. And then what happened was, with running ads alongside that, pushed it even further, because what that said in the algorithms is this game sells. And because that then pushed me onto the front page of travel games, that means I naturally got more sales. And it also means that I then became a 2-time bestseller in dedicated card games because of how well it was doing. But took my rank in toys and games, and you can imagine there's over 2 million toys and games. So it's very hard to rank there. So it managed to take me down to sometimes 3,000, rank 3,000 out of 2 million. So it's like, don't look at the big picture, look at the very small picture and where you can break out and have that success. And that's exactly the model in which, obviously, you lose at Pandemic, because it just breaks out so fast. But that has led me on to other things. So Amazon for me is, I always see things as marketing approaches. So I don't make any money from this game. This is all the first, I'm in my first 2 years, first year of sales. This is all getting me the marketing out there to say, look, there's a game on the market and it's something that you should really get, because it has all these features in it, and as a family it's a great game. But it's not like, I'm not doing it for profit at the moment, and everything that I make on Amazon goes straight back into the business. So obviously I'm doing Tabletop Gaming Live, I'm going to Essen. That money's paying for my hotels, and it's paying for me to have a stand there, and it pays for me to have food whilst I'm out there. But it doesn't go into my pocket at all for me to then have a life. So yeah, it's a strategy, I would say, and I always say that to people. And also Kickstarter is like, don't go on Kickstarter expecting to make any money for you unless you expect to do one product run and then just take the money from the product run. If you want to grow a business, you're going to have to put all that money that you make, any spare money, and put it back into the business, and keep doing that until it starts making a profit. There's a lot to digest there, I understand.
I think there's 2 things I have to say. I think the first thing is I think this is the beginning of potentially many conversations, because you have to come back on the show.
That's what Unlucky Frog said. I do things differently, very differently.
Well, I like to think I'm not formulaic, and then I just look at my ingredients and realise that I am. But I just no. We've had like a fair number of conversations kind of back and forward now, and you seem to be one of these people who you have to keep an eye on, because it looks like there's always going to be something new and exciting, and you're obviously making a name for yourself.
Well, we haven't even spoken about the Autumn Fair and what's happening next. Something big's happening, but I can't talk about it. Like, I put out a post on my personal Facebook page, and I said, we're celebrating, but I can't say anything. I really want to tell people, because, I want to tell people that when you have a dream and you want to follow it, it's possible for it to happen. So basically, I'm at the point where, in the next couple of months, once something happens, hopefully it happens. I've still got my fingers crossed that it's going to happen. It's very positive at the moment, but that it is possible that your dreams will come true, because I've had this on my mind for the last 2 years, and it's just, I'm just blown away by what's happening. And I want to give people that advice. I actually did a 20-minute vlog, just telling people where I am, but I haven't put it anywhere. I've kept it for myself because I'm unsure whether to post it. But I give you something that I said in it. I don't really want to give people a step-by-step of how you do what I've done once I've done it, or once I can tell you what it is. But what I want to give people from the story that I'm creating with Quirk is that there's a way for you to do what I'm doing, but it's going to be your own journey, and you're going to take your own steps, and there's going to be ways for you to work around the same things that I've went through, but it's not necessarily going to be step by step how I've done it. Do you know what? I've done a video. I edited the video, and in it I say what's happening, but then I want to release it because actually I say what's happening, and then I've edited it so that I've taken the volume down on my voice. I've put a quirk off card over my mouth, and then I've put like a weird noise. So as soon as I say it, you don't hear it. So it's like, it's a real tease, but I don't want to say it just in case I jeopardize it.
Where do we find you on the interweb nets?
I was going to say asleep, but on the internet. I am on Twitter at Emmerse Studios and Instagram and Facebook at Emmerse Studios.
Okay.
And my website is www.quirkthegame.com if you want that too.
There you go. So what we'll do is we'll take these links and we'll put them in the show notes so that we have notes to show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
This has been amazing. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, and we appreciate everybody that does, you can follow us on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on Tumblr. You just have to search We're Not Wizards. You will find us where there are no wizards, basically. If you want to listen to us, you can find us on Stitcher and Acast and Spreaker and Player FM and all these wonderful other places like Podknife and even Podbean. You can listen through our website, which is we'renotwizards.com, and you can read our words by going to we'renotwizards.blogspot.com as well. If you really like what we're doing, then please go to Apple Podcasts and drop us a rating, drop us a review. And as we say on our reviews, if you really kind of like us, remember, don't give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed, and don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. Give us 5 because it's in the middle and it's average, and we are just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, Emma from Emmerse Studios. Thank you very, very much for coming on, Emma.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute delight, and there's only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Emma?
No.
Fantastic.
Well, maybe if you play Quirk.
Don't even every single flipping time. Honestly. I'm not going to cut that bit out now.
So mean.
But I am going to cut it out, and then I'm not going to cut it out, and then I'm going to leave the bit about me saying I'm not going to cut it out, and then people will go, what's he talking about, cutting out what? So it'll be even. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Emma. Say goodbye.
Bye.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe. Roll6s.com. And just keep an eye out for what Emma's doing, because and then she'll be back on. I promise you. But until the next time, goodbye.